said, I'll be your candidate. And so we checked him out on Google and found out he graduated in 2012. Well, apparently he never read the Constitution because you got to be 25 to run for Congress. And he was only 20. So this time we had a young man come to us, Dennis Murphy. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know anybody that we've put up in the last 40 years more qualified and knows more about how the Republicans have failed this community and this country than Dennis Murphy. I now introduce you to Dennis Murphy.
Well, thanks. That's a great introduction, and I assure you I'm way more than 25. I want to thank the 2nd District Committee for organizing this delicious dinner. Hats off to the food. Wasn't Governor Blanchard's speech really good? I got in here and I was looking around for the teleprompter. Dallas must have forgot it. So realizing that he might not have one, I printed my talking points in 30 font, literally, because that way I don't have to use my reading glasses. So, yeah, no doubt. This is kind of impromptu after having listened to Governor Blanchard. You remember when he said something about facts, fact-based. If anybody goes back and looks at my campaign website, my campaign Facebook, I have been talking about a fact-based campaign since we started this process in January. And to me, that's probably one of the biggest problems we have in politics right now, is that there's a whole segment of population out there, and to be honest, some on the left and many on the right, that just totally eschew all facts. And I think we need to bring facts back into the discussion as we move forward. But tonight I want to talk about two things as I go forward. One is about language in politics, and then specifically about this particular election. First, on the language. When we first got into this race collecting signatures, and my wife and my family has been very supportive, my wife Joni, Brendan, Patrick, a woman asked me how I identified myself. And again, I'm not plagiarizing Mr. Blanchard, so don't go sue me. But I said I consider myself a pragmatic progressive. And the lady goes, well, what does that mean? I said, well, I support progressive, liberal causes and ideas, but I realize that in the political process, you're not going to get everything you want every time. And well, I asked, I saw another house I was collecting signatures, and a man asked me, who did I think was the greatest president in the modern era? Without hesitation, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Without hesitation. Thank you. And when you look at what he accomplished and what he dealt with and what he did, Franklin Roosevelt embodies progressive pragmatism. Just take Social Security for an example. He enacted probably one of the most groundbreaking programs that this country's ever seen up to that point in time, but it wasn't perfect. It didn't encompass African Americans. It didn't encompass farm workers. Barely covered any women, especially if they already lived in the home and the husband was a breadwinner. But he got past what he could in the political environment of the time, and as a society, we've since built on that. That's progressive, that's pragmatic. And then I was looking at the New York Times article the other day, and there was an opinion piece, and then I always like to read the columns. Sometimes it gets my blood pressure up, and my wife goes, what are you doing on the computer? And I go, well, if somebody's wrong on the internet, So the guy was writing something about, wow, there was a backlash against progressive excess. I thought, progressive excess. Progressive views got us civil rights, voting rights, elimination of child labor, Social Security, Medicare, women's rights, minimum wage, worker safety, environmental protections for our air and our water. It was progressive action that comforted Americans during the Great Depression, and it was progressive action that saved the economy in 2009 under Barack Obama. It was progressive action by the Clintons, Hillary and Bill, that fought for health care insurance for all Americans in the 90s. They crashed and burned on it, but Barack Obama was able to bring that progressive action back with the Democratic Congress, and now we have a health insurance coverage that encompasses 77,000 people in this district alone that would not have had health insurance otherwise. If that's progressive excess, I'll take a bunch more. Frankly, we need to embrace our FDR, because I guarantee you the Republicans are embracing their Herbert Hoover. Seriously, their economic policies, you could go back to 1920 and see the same words. Right? So, to me, that's a fact. But let's look at some language part of what the Republicans say. When Justice Scalia died, and this is a senatorial issue, not a House issue, but let's listen to the way they talk. The Republicans said, we're not going to consider a nominee until the next president's in office. Well, they've started to change their position, right? Now they're saying, we're not going to consider the next nominee until after the election. The first phrase was predicated on the assumption that they were going to win the White House. Now that that is becoming less assured, but don't take it for granted, go out and vote, they've changed their view. I predict, and maybe I'm all wet here, but I predict that because Hillary Clinton wins the White House, they're going to hold hearings and approve Merrick Garland right away. They would rather give an outgoing president a nomination victory than the incoming one. So that's my prediction for now. One of my campaign points is support for the Affordable Care Act, pejoratively called Obamacare by the Republicans. Obama since embraced that. But when that language, let's go back to language, when that first was passed, Republicans, we have to repeal, and then they always added a bunch of other adjectives to it. They wanted to repeal it. But over the last 6 years, if you looked at what their language migrated to, what did they say? They said, we need to repeal and replace. Repeal and replace. So what that means is they've already conceded by saying that we need to replace Obamacare, that what existed before the law was in effect wasn't working, and that Americans needed something. They just don't like Obamacare, so that's why they say replace. Unfortunately, not once in 60 times before votes have they ever enacted a replacement idea. And in fact, I just read the news the other day, Paul Ryan and their Better Way thing. Oh, we've got a plan. Well, they do that. It's like a shell game. They pull it out like every 2 years and say, we've got a plan. And then the election gets held, and then they don't have a plan. It's like they hold up a blank envelope and say, there's some money in this. But then they stick the envelope back in their pocket and they pretend that they're going to give it to you, but they never do. So, but they've conceded by saying replace that we've already won, that Americans wanted something. And I think that's a language choice we have to watch as we go forward in the next 100 days. I don't know if that's going to be true of Mr. Trump at the top of the ticket, because I think he just says whatever he wants. But watch the rest of the Republicans on the down ticket. You watch how their language changes as things occur, and they will hedge their bets on things, to be sure. So that's what I say when we're pragmatic progressives. And to digress a little bit, I too agree with a lot of what Bernie said, but I do think that Hillary is the pragmatic progressive, and I think that we got the right person on the top of the ticket. Not that I would have supported either one. But, just the last few comments I want to talk about now immediately, the election. We live in a federalist political system, which means essentially that victory at one level doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have successes all the way through all the various levels of government. We have West Michigan Democrats that can get our voices heard at the local level, city councils, and we can get some people elected to the State House, Colleen, Kim, Tim Meyer, Terry Sable. We need those in the state houses. But if we don't get Democrats at every level of government where we can have an influence in all that's said up and down the ticket, I think what's going to happen is that we could be shooting for goals at the state level, and it'll be stymied because of things that don't come out of the federal government. So winning seats at every possible level ensures that our voices are heard and helps our goals get met. In case anybody didn't see my Facebook and my website post after the primary, I just want to delve in real briefly into the numbers a little bit. So after the election, I looked at the numbers from all the county returns, and of the total votes cast for my opponent and myself, I had 31% and he had 60%. I looked at past elections, and essentially after the last 3 elections, the worst turnout, the worst numbers against Huizenga were basically 60-30. So we're already at the floor. All we have, no place else to go but up, which I consider that a positive in this very volatile year. So what I'm looking forward to as we go forward towards the general election is Democrats that didn't vote in the primary. moderates and independents in the middle who don't really affiliate with either party, maybe checking the box on our side, and hopefully maybe even reaching out and getting some of those disgruntled Republicans who just don't like the way their party's going. And they want to see somebody who's going to go in office and work for West Michigan in a bipartisan manner. And this is digressing a little bit from my prepared words, but talking about bipartisan, when you see Huizinga Huddle come out and he talks about signing on to some bipartisan bill, why look at the legislation and the numbers? He has one of the worst records in Congress of voting on bills in a bipartisan way. In other words, there was a PolitiFact type website that did the data. Dan Kildee from Flint, Democrat. He has signed on to 20% of Republican bills because he thought they were a good idea. He thought whatever they had, there were some good ideas there. And that's how bills move through Congress, my understanding. They get more support, especially on both sides. People sign on as co-sponsors, the bill gets moved forward. Even Justin Amash in the 3rd District has signed on to like 12% of Democratic bills. Bill Huizinga has signed on to 3.7% of Democratic introduced bills. 3.7. So when he sits there and touts signing on to a bipartisan bill, he's actually touting the bipartisanship of the Democrats because he hasn't signed on to Democratic bills. He's signing on to bills that Democrats have signed on that were introduced by a Republican. So again, fact-based legislation, fact-based approach to campaigning. So I entered this race because I saw potential in West Michigan that wasn't being met, and I think it's being squandered by the Republicans. I think that the potential is being squandered by Bill Huizinga. He doesn't pay attention to Muskegon, Oceana, Ludington, Baldwin, Newaygo, and I'm not trying to take anything away from the Holland and Ottawa County area. I realize he understands that's his power base, but this is a big district, not as big as some, but it's a big district, and everybody needs attention. And they all need a representative who cares about the entire district. So I think West Michigan wants better and can do better and deserves better. Thank you. So I just want to say, I think that we need to figure out how we can contribute to the national debate and discourse with our language and how we can facilitate our goals. How does West Michigan want to present itself at the national level? This is not just about West Michigan getting what we can from the nation, but what also can we contribute to the nation? And we live in West Michigan with goals for what we want for our families and our communities, but if the nation moves in a different direction, we won't be able to achieve those goals. We will need to have national influence to be able to do that. We can't just do it in a district or in a state, we need to do it nationally. I would like to quote Franklin Roosevelt: "It is common sense to take a method and try it. If it fails, admit it frankly, try another. But above all, try something." FDR's recommendation during the Depression is as relevant today as it was then. It is necessary to try something. We've tried Republicans for 14 years, Pete Hoekstra and Bill Huizinga, has handpicked a successor. But let's frankly admit that they failed us in West Michigan, and we need to try something new for West Michigan, a Democrat in D.C. America kind of is going down a dangerous path this election. We can't let this go by, and Congress is the venue in which Americans can voice their concerns at the national level. And if we win the 2nd District, we can influence not only our future here, but we can help influence the future of the nation. We need to work together, as Hillary Clinton says, stronger together. So let me be your voice in Washington. Thank you.